I'll pick and choose my spots like I have been doing.
Chances are I'm going to do better here than there, and
I'm optimistic.
Much more about locations.
TPC Deere Run looks exactly like it's supposed to. The fairways are cut tight, the greens are running fast and true, the grandstands are up. The Quad Cities have shown up early, the way they always do for this tournament. And yet, if you walk the range on Tuesday morning, something is missing. The names on the practice tee sheet do not match the names on your TV screen every single Sunday. This is not an off week. This is not a coincidence. 12 of the highest-ranked players in the world made a decision individually on their own schedules, and it added up to the same result. They are not here. And when that many stars vanish from one event at the same time, that is not bad luck. That is a pattern. And a pattern this obvious does not happen by accident. So here is the real question we need to answer today. Is this just a scheduling quirk before a major championship? Or is this the moment the PGA Tour's regular season officially stopped mattering? You clicked because you want the list. You want the names. I am going to give you every one of them. But if I just read you 12 names and moved on, you would understand nothing about why this is happening, and you would miss the part of this story that should actually worry you. So stick with me, because the list is only the surface. What is underneath it is a system that is quietly rewriting what a PGA Tour event even means. Here is my take before we go any further. I think the Tour built two different tours inside one tour, and the John Deere Classic is exactly where you can see the seam. But I want to know what you think. Is it fair for players to chase the biggest paydays and the best major prep, even if it guts events like this one? Or is this a betrayal of the fans and the sponsors who make their careers possible in the first place? Put your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Now walk the property with me for a second. TPC Deere Run in Silvis, Illinois is one of the most beloved stops on the entire schedule. Wide fairways, soft, generous conditions, pure greens that make birdies come in bunches. The winning score has finished at 20 under par or lower in 5 of the last 7 editions. It is a course built for entertainment and a tournament built on community. This event has funneled well over $160 million into local charities since it began, and it generates tens of millions in economic impact for the Quad Cities every single year it's played. Families plan their summer vacations around this week. Kids get autographs from players who, for 1 week, feel like hometown heroes. And yet, walk the range Tuesday morning and you will not find the world number 1. You will not find the biggest name in Northern Ireland. You will not find the hottest player to win a major championship this season. They are not hurt. They are not suspended. They simply chose somewhere else to be. That somewhere else is the entire story. Here's the math that explains almost all of it. The John Deere Classic sits in the single most dangerous position on the entire golf calendar, the week directly before the Genesis Scottish Open, which sits directly before the Open Championship. If you are a top 50 player in the world, and you actually care about winning the year's final major, you are staring down a brutal choice. Stay in Illinois for a very good, but not enormous purse of $8.8 million, or fly across the Atlantic early, adjust to the time change, and get extra reps on fast, firm, links-style turf that has nothing in common with the soft Midwest fairways at Deere Run. For a player who is building his whole season around 4 weeks a year, that decision is not close. Every extra day in Scotland is a day of acclimatization you cannot buy back once the major starts. So the world's best player and the biggest global draw in the sport both made the same calculation this year, skip the community event, protect the major prep, and they were not alone. Word around the tour is that a wider group of top 50 ranked players, guys who almost never miss a signature event, quietly made travel plans that routed straight through the UK instead of through the Quad Cities. That is the official explanation. It is clean, it is defensible, and honestly, it is not even wrong. But if travel logistics were the whole story, the sponsors would understand. They would nod, they would wish the players well overseas, and they would move on. They are not moving on. Because underneath the travel excuse is a structural problem the tour built on purpose. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Back in 2023, the PGA Tour split its own schedule into 2 tiers. Tier 1 is the signature events, smaller fields, enormous purses, mandatory appearances from the top stars, guaranteed primetime television windows. Tier 2 is everything else. Smaller purses, no appearance requirements, and an increasingly obvious signal from the tour about which events actually matter to leadership. The John Deere Classic sits firmly in Tier 2, and once an event gets that label, something changes in how the top players treat it. It stops being a mandatory stop and starts being optional, a nice-to-have instead of a have-to-be-there. A player finishing top 10 at a signature event can pocket well over $2 million for that single week. A player finishing top 10 here takes home a fraction of that. When the purse gap is that wide, and the points gap barely moves the needle for someone who is already exempt into every major and every signature event of the year, the incentive to show up disappears. Not because the players are ungrateful, because the system stopped giving them a reason to be there. And this is where it gets uncomfortable for the tour, because it is not the only Tier 2 event losing its shine. Add in the cut from 125 fully exempt cards down to 100, and you have removed 25 players who used to fill fields like this one every single year. Those players are gone, grinding for status elsewhere. Combine that with the stars who no longer feel obligated to show up, and you get exactly what we're seeing this week, a field that is deep in effort and character, but thin on the marquee names that move a television rating. Now, before you assume every top player treats this event like an afterthought, I want to give you the counterpoint, because it matters. Chris Gotterup is here. He won twice already this season, including a signature event, and he is one of only 2 top 20 ranked players in this entire field. He didn't have to be here. Jordan Spieth is here too, a former champion at this exact course, chasing the version of his game that won here as a very young pro. Ricky Fowler is here, Keegan Bradley is here, looking to recapture momentum heading into the stretch run of the season. So this is not a total boycott, it's a split, and that split tells you everything about where a player's priorities sit relative to their status on tour. That is also the irony sitting right in the middle of this story. The players who most need a big week, the ones still trying to secure their card, still trying to break through for a first win, are the ones showing up in force. 19-year-old Blades Brown is here on a special temporary exemption trying to lock up his card for next season. First-time pro Jackson Koivunen teed it up here in his professional debut. Amateur standout Preston Stout is here chasing his first cut as a pro. These are the players who cannot afford to skip anything. Meanwhile, the players who are already financially and competitively bulletproof are the ones with the freedom to say no. That is not an accident. That is the entire design of the modern PGA Tour laid bare in 144-man field. The players at the top are protected, guaranteed status, guaranteed signature event access, guaranteed exemptions regardless of how Tier 2 events go for them. The players at the bottom are exposed, and exposure means you show up everywhere, every single week because you cannot afford not to. The gap between those two groups is not just about money anymore. It is about which players the tour has decided are worth protecting and which events get left to survive on their own. Now think about what that means for a sponsor. John Deere has backed this tournament for decades and has committed to continue doing so for years to come. That is the kind of long-term, community-first sponsorship that used to be the backbone of professional golf. In exchange, they expect a marquee field that justifies the marketing spend, the hospitality tents, and the television window. What they got this year is a genuinely strong, deep field of grinders and rising stars, but not the household names that move a national broadcast audience. That is a real tension. Sponsors do not write enormous checks to fund development golf. They write checks because they believe the biggest stars in the world will be standing on their signage come Sunday afternoon. So here is where this actually leads. If the tour keeps building bigger walls around a shrinking circle of elite players, bigger purses, tighter fields, more guaranteed status, then every event outside that circle starts to function the same way the John Deere Classic did this year. Not dead, not empty, but quietly downgraded, one season at a time, until the regular tour event stops meaning what it used to mean, and that has consequences that go far beyond one tournament in Illinois. The entire regular season depends on the idea that every event matters, that the FedEx Cup points race means something every single week, that a win in July carries real weight toward a career. But if the top of the sport can simply opt out of events like this whenever a bigger prize is on the calendar, then the season stops being a season. It becomes a highlight reel stitched together from a handful of signature weeks, with everything else reduced to background noise that keeps the lights on for everybody else. Here's the list you actually came for, the players who chose to be somewhere other than Silvis this week. The reigning world number one coming off a tough finish, using this week to reset before the year's last major. The biggest needle mover from Northern Ireland protecting his prep for the Open. The player fresh off his first win of the season, choosing acclimatization overseas instead of defending a home soil crowd favorite. And beyond those headline absences, a wider band of top 50 ranked players made the same quiet calculation that a week adjusting to European turf and time zones was worth more to their season than a week in the Quad Cities, no matter how good the purse or how deep the tournament's history runs. That's 12 players, by most counts, who are not walking these fairways this week. 12 players who decided, independently, that this event was the one they could live without. Here's my final point of view. I don't think these players did anything wrong by chasing preparation for the biggest week of the year. That's what professionals are supposed to do. But I do think the tour built a structure that makes decisions like this inevitable, one where loyalty to the community events that built this sport has quietly become optional for anyone who has already made it to the top. The players are simply responding, rationally, to incentives the tour itself created. So now it's your turn. Do you blame the players for making the smart business decision for their own careers? Or is this squarely on tour leadership for building a two-tier structure that turns events like the John Deere Classic into afterthoughts? Tell me where you land in the comments. I want to see both sides argue this one out. And if you think this ends with one tournament in Illinois, you're not paying attention. This is a preview of what happens to every event that isn't a major or a signature stop. Subscribe, because we are tracking exactly which tournament gets hit next. And trust me, this is only getting started.